help will come. Welcome, 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 welcome. Welcome to the 2025 Martha's Vineyard Book Festival. I'm Sue Ellen Lazarus, the director and founder of the festival. We're so glad you're here. And for some, we know how hard it was to get here. Whether you've come from across the country or across the island, after a year of planning, it's a true joy to welcome 30 remarkable authors, along with their families and friends, and a brilliant group of vineyard writers who bring this festival to life. Some of you have endured extraordinary hardship and travails on your way to Martha's Vineyard. And for those who made it, like Jeffrey, after a 3 a.m. flight, we picked you carefully. We knew you were special. And there are a few who are still en route, and we wish them Godspeed, and we think they'll be here in time for dinner. Among you are Pulitzer Prize winners, novelists, journalists, historians, chefs, anthropologists, firefighters, marine biologists, and at least one Rhodes Scholar. You've acted, taught, cooked, reported, protested, and opened iconic restaurants. You've made this festival as wide-ranging as it is inspiring. To our sponsors, donors, and local partners, thank you. The Free Festival exists because of your generosity and because this island values curiosity, dialogue, and great storytelling. A huge thanks to the Chilmark Community Center, the Chilmark Library, the town of Chilmark, who puts up with us, the Vineyard Gazette, Bunch of Grapes Bookstore, South Mountain Company, Martha's Vineyard Bank, Cape Cod 5, and so many small businesses who support us, including Martha's Vineyard Glassworks. And for me, a special thank you to my family and friends who each made an extraordinary effort to be here and to help pull this festival off. So thank you, a particular heartfelt thanks and lots of love to you. There's a team of people who come from Washington, D.C. because I like to have them nearby. So a real thank you to those people. We owe this festival to a dream team. Valerie Rosenberg, who's standing in the back. Steve Fisher, Pat Sullivan, Wendy Wolfson, Annie Treitman, and our very wise advisory board, Dawn Davis, Joan Nathan, Michelle Norris, George Gibson, who's still en route, Alexandra Styron, Jessica Harris, Barbara Phillips, and Geraldine Brooks. Martha's Vineyard is more than a beautiful place. It's a place where creativity thrives, where ideas matter, and where learning and leisure go hand in hand. But as Joseph Lee and Aquina Wampanoag, who is here as an author in this year's festival, writes, the thing about Martha's Vineyard is that it's more complicated than people think. Way more complicated. A better understanding and appreciation of that complexity is what we hope you'll get a flavor of, the authors will get a flavor of this weekend. The festival is a volunteer-driven labor of love, born from a shared belief in the power of community. We do this to connect with each other and with the wise thinkers and writers gathered here. These conversations matter. They ignite curiosity, deepen understanding, and remind us why dialogue, real, thoughtful, in-person dialogue, is more important than ever before. This weekend is a celebration of great writing, bold thinking, and this beautiful, complicated island that brings us together. And tonight we mark a milestone, the 20th anniversary of the Martha's Vineyard Book Festival. In 2005, our first author in the program was John Abrams, a local voice with national impact. And here we are in 2025 with John Abrams once again, first on the list. In 2017, our opening panel was provocatively titled Tweets, Leaks, and Turmoil, covering the Trump White House. That night featured Glenn Thrush, E.J. Dionne, and Ashley Parker. Tonight, in a bit of a historical rhyme, we welcome you to Signal versus Noise, covering this White House, with Ashley Parker once again at the table, so to speak, and this time joined by Jeffrey Goldberg. Jeffrey Goldberg is editor-in-chief of The Atlantic and moderator of Washington Week with The Atlantic on PBS. Under his leadership, The Atlantic has won its first 3 Pulitzers and 3 straight National Magazine Awards for General Excellence. His newest book on heroism builds on his reporting about Donald Trump's controversial comments about the military. More recently, he has been gifted with the superpower of intangibility. In his case, being able to pass through the walls of encrypted chat rooms undetected. Whether this is a blessing or a curse, I don't know, but perhaps he will share that with us this evening and enlighten us. Ashley Parker is a political analyst for NBC and MSNBC, and now a staff writer at The Atlantic. She's a 3-time Pulitzer winner who spent 8 years at the Washington Post covering the Trump presidency, leading the White House bureau under Biden and reporting on the 2024 campaign as senior national political correspondent. In closing, I'd just like to add a personal reflection. This is a time when the rapidly evolving political landscape is fraught with uncertainty. Many media outlets are choosing to settle litigation or avoid reporting on crucial policies that impact us all. We are fortunate to have media outlets like The Atlantic and journalists like Jeffrey and Ashley who continue unbowed and unfettered to report and speak the truth. So please join me in welcoming them, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you guys for being here. I think we probably have to start with Signalgate for a couple of reasons. It's the name of our panel, technically. And also, I had been corresponding with Sue Ellen a little bit in the run-up to this book festival, and she was asking me for names of good political books coming out this year and who she should invite on the political front, and I'd given her some recommendations. But I think it was no coincidence that immediately after your huge scoop, I then got another email from her saying, do you think you could get Jeff Goldberg to come to the festival as well? So I believe it published on a Monday. I was brought into it or gained awareness of it on a Thursday evening, but I had some awareness something was going on because anytime I would walk by your office, there were a lot of people packed in, mainly lawyers and like very serious looking faces. And so I just wanted for you to start to take us through how it was that you got added to an encrypted text chain with the vice president, the Pentagon chief, the DNI about a bombing campaign in Yemen.
Ashley is Ashley's a great reporter, and you know she's a great reporter because when she saw a safe being moved into my office, she immediately deduced that something was going on in my office. And cameras were being installed to monitor the safe because that's a longer story, but we won the Guinness Book of World Records prize for stuffing the most number of lawyers into a small glass office as possible. The contours of the story, I think, are well known. I've actually talked to Kara Swisher about the contours of this story. The question, the most salient question, and maybe still unanswerable, is what was the slip up? What was the break in the time-space continuum that allowed Mike Waltz to insert my number into this chat that they should not have been having? In any case, and the truth is, I don't know. What I do know is that Mike Waltz is not telling the truth when he says he doesn't know me. There's actually photographs of us together. We spent the summer in Saint-Tropez. It's not that, that was a joke for anybody who's actually writing this down. So there was that, and so I have reason to believe that my phone number was in his phone anyway, but it is true.
And it wasn't just mysteriously sucked in to his phone.
No, well, the joke about the whole sucking in part of Signalgate, and for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, it was Waltz and Hexeth both suggested. Hexeth suggested something even more elaborate, that somehow I had hacked into Signal, which is an encrypted messaging. The real joke of that is that as this is going on and the stories are coming out, and one of the details, small details, was that I was screenshotting all of this all along because I didn't know when my phone was going to actually explode, right? And one of the reasons it's so funny that Pete Hexeth thinks that I somehow broke into the Signal servers is that one of my kids, I don't remember which one, during this thing says, the most shocking thing of all is that you learned how to take a screenshot without asking us. Because the conversation is, wait, so I press this button, I hold the same button? So like the idea that I was going to break into Signal was pretty silly. They were very proud of me, though, I got to say. So Waltz, what happened? Well, and this can happen. The sucked into is sort of a joking way of putting it, or a dumb way of putting it. But he was supposed to call me during the campaign. I was working on another story about some nefariousness, and he was supposed to call me. Stephen Chung, who's now the White House communications chief, passed along my number. He didn't call me, but I think it may be the case that mistranscribing, I was put into somebody else's, that's the most plausible. There's a lot of speculation that they wanted me to see it. That doesn't make any sense.
It was also the version I heard. I know
inside the White House.
Inside the White House, when I was trying to figure out. It's a little self-serving for them, but it also, how you have someone and there's like 4 numbers under them and only 2 are their actual number. That was how it was kind of explained to me.
You don't clean out your, telephone hygiene is the actual lesson of all of this. That's how I think I got in. And of course, and some of you know the story. I didn't actually think that this was real. I thought it was an operation of some sort, a foreign intelligence operation, or one of these organizations that's trying to entrap journalists and sometimes succeeds in entrapping journalists. And the reason, obviously this became, we had a working group on this as it got more serious. But the reason we thought that was our default position, that this could not be real, is that it was too stupid to be real. I'm not saying that, and I'm trying to be a little bit sarcastic, but the probability here is very, very remote that somehow the entire national security and leadership apparatus of the United States would inadvertently bring in one of the jokes here. Can I tell another funny sort of thing? Was that a former national security advisor, there are enough of them are alive so I can semi-mask this, called me and said, as this was unfolding, and said, you know, the funny thing here is imagining Mike Waltz going into the Oval Office and explaining to the president what was going on. And the dialogue in this former national security advisor's mind went as follows. He said, Mr. President, I have bad news and I have worse news. And he said, what's the bad news? And he said, well, we were having a chat on a commercial messaging app that we shouldn't have been having about the forthcoming bombing of Yemen, and we inadvertently invited a journalist into the conversation. And he said, what's the worst news? And the worst news is it was Jeff Goldberg. Because the probabilities there, that because I was not, and I don't think continue to be not, you might have a better sense of it, that popular in the White House. So the thing is that the whole thing is stupid, both in their operational security or lack of operational security, and the fact that I got pulled into this. I don't know. I could tell stories all day about how stupid it is.
And I know you've talked a little bit about this, but very briefly, when was the moment you sort of actually realized, like, okay, I'm not getting punked?
Well, no. So what happened was Saturday afternoon, I'm going supermarket shopping, and the message, the chat, kind of it was intermittent. Like it would there would be a burst of messages on Friday and then nothing for like 20 hours. And then what happened on Saturday around noon, I guess, Eastern time, Pete Hegseth comes into the conversation and presents what, I later published after they, I wasn't going to publish it, but after they asserted that it wasn't national security, sensitive national security information, and said that I didn't have it, they forced us to publish it. That came through, and the salient detail in all of that was that it said I'm trying to remember the exact time. People can call it up on their phones at this point, but basically 3 hours hence, or an hour and a half from now, the bombs will start dropping on Sana'a, right? And so, I added 1 and 1 and said, if I just sit here and wait. I mean, at that point, I was like, this is a very elaborate trick. But, I sat there and I waited, and sure enough, about 3 minutes after the target time in the chat, I go on Twitter, and there are reports of explosions in Sana'a, and then it unfolds. I get a text from our colleague, a signal text from our colleague Shane Harris, who covers the intelligence community, who was definitely in the camp of somebody is punking you. I don't know what the trick is, but this is all. And he said, yeah. So I guess and I said, yes, I guess I'm in the national security. I guess I'm a member of the National Security Council now. And that was, that was something, and it's serious. Like, why the hell am I seeing this stuff?
So when you're interviewing your boss, I feel like you have to say this, but in this case,
this
it's
is
true.
not at all awkward or ethically dubious at all, by the way.
No, I mean, I think the way we handled it and you handled it was just incredibly responsible. And so I want you to talk through, once you realize it's real and once you realize this is something you're going to have to write about, like what were the sort of considerations where you're trying to sort of convey the fullness of what just, like both the absurdity and the seriousness and the content of the messages to the public, but balancing all the other concerns that a journalist has to deal with when you're writing about national security issues?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. And I've covered national security. I mean, I'm editor now, but when I was full-time reporting, I covered these issues for a couple of decades. And we're all, one of the accusations that came from Trump partisans after this is that, I don't know if it's an accusation or a kind of a indictment / observation, was that, if this had happened in the Obama administration or Biden, you would never have reported that. And it's like, you do not understand reporters. I mean, I don't care who's doing it. If they're doing something stupid, it's our job to put it out there. So, and that was the number one goal, was we have discovered inadvertently and passively an immense flaw in the national security operational security of the United States. And so we have to, and what do journalists do? We hold officials, people in power, publicly accountable. We don't call them and say, hey, you shouldn't be texting me. We write about it. So we knew we had to write about it. We also knew that, or I knew, even as a national security reporter, that I did not want this kind of information. I don't want this kind of information. I don't need to know 2 hours before an attack the flight route of the U.S. bomber. I don't want to be responsible for having that information. I mean, I stayed in my car with my phone for that hour and a half period. I didn't want my phone was, I looked at it almost like kryptonite. It's like, there's stuff coming over this that if somebody, and like, it's not implausible, and we had all these thoughts, it's not implausible that my phone, like the phones of other journalists, would be of interest to Iranian, Russian, Chinese, etc., intelligence operations. And so it's not like my car was going to protect me from a Russian, interference operation. But I didn't want the phone out of my sight because I don't want this kind of stuff. I want to know why they're doing stuff. After action, what it meant. Was it a mistake? Was it this? Was it that? I don't need this stuff.
It's worth noting that, and I understood why you did it, but as a journalist, I was like, like that as soon as you realized that it was real, you left the chat.
Well, I mean, yes, I left the chat. I left the chat with a small battalion of lawyers. I'll just say that. There were serious concerns. I never believed this to be. I mean, I'm very, very grateful for for all the legal help that I got, and it was, as you know, hot and cold running lawyers for a long time. There was an assumption that I can't remember. I've been instructed in this like 8 times, and I can't remember what I'm supposed to say and what I'm not supposed to say.
Just go ahead.
Right. It doesn't leave the vineyard, right? I mean, it's an island. You're trying to encourage to get me in trouble. That's great. Amazing. Put it this way. There were clear expectation. The reason we had safes and cameras is there's a clear expectation that we would be, on the part of some of our very, very skilled national security attorneys and criminal attorneys, that I would be charged and the Atlantic by extension would be charged under the Espionage Act. Clear expectations or clear belief that given the nature of the relationship between the Trump administration and the media, and especially my media organization, that they would come after us in a possibly existential way. And having the knowledge of what's going on. First of all, I wanted to write the story and I wanted to trigger them into understanding what was going on. I mean, one of the sort of disturbing subsidiary facts of this is when I did withdraw those of you who use Signal know, when you pull out of a Signal chat, it says so-and-so, Ashley Parker has left the chat. And we had, the night that I did that, it was the night of the Gridiron dinner, actually, weirdly. So this is a bad movie that would be taking place at the Gridiron. The night I did that, there was an expectation that there would be a subpoena, there would be a search warrant, that they would be coming to my house and my office, and
or at least like a phone call.
The assumption, yes. I mean, the worst case assumption was that they would invoke national security and try to seize my devices at the very least, seize whatever we have backup servers in other places, the whole 9 yards. The most disturbing thing is that nothing happened. I was trying to trigger a response. I was hoping that Mike would call and say, what's going on? Or whatever. But they didn't even know. They didn't notice that I was in the chat, and they didn't notice that I wasn't in the chat. By the way, I'm sorry. I just have to say this, but it's like, and we can get into this, and I think we probably will in terms of the relationship between the media and the press, and media and the Trump administration. The story didn't have to keep going after it went going. This is a parenthetical, but you'll see the point of it in a second. The story didn't have to keep going the way it went if they had just said, "Oh, whoops, that was bad. We shouldn't have done that. Okay, we're not doing it again." But instead, they went into full attack mode, attacking my character, the truthfulness of what we were saying, the Atlantic itself, etc. And we're sitting there saying, you didn't have to include me in the chat. Like if we're so terrible, why'd you put us in the chat? All that sort of stuff. And I think Waltz and Hegseth, they made a mistake by continuing to be immediately going on the very castigating offensive, which prompted me to say the only kind of snotty thing I said on television that week, which is, because what happened was Mike Waltz issued a statement calling me a loser. And so I went on some show and I said, he can call me whatever he wants, but at least I know how to text, And I just was proud of that. I wanted to mention it. Thought of a funny line while on TV, not 10 minutes after you get off TV, which is the usual, yes. Right? So the reason I got out of the chat was I believe it was the right thing to do from a national, because I don't want this information. Right. I wanted to write as quickly as I could, and I wanted to be out of it. It was the considered opinion of people with a lot of wisdom about American national security law that would be the correct thing to do. We can debate it all day long. Correct thing to do. I had found the thing that I wanted. I had proved the thing that I wanted to prove,
right? Which
is that there was a breach, and I wanted to get out there, and I wanted to get out there in a clean way. And I needed to call them to ask them what was going on. So I said, look, I got out of the chat. Why'd you put me in the chat? Was the question to the White House, and we were obviously all involved in that. So that's why we left the chat. I also knew, in a way, in other college this is an interesting lawyer-journalist divide. The lawyers who are paid to, talk about how long I'm going to be in the D.C. jail, present worst-case scenarios. We all thought that there was no way that they would charge me under the Espionage Act because I was the passive recipient of the information. If they were going to charge me under the Espionage Act, they would have to charge themselves, because they're the ones who are using a non-secure commercial app and just bringing in random phone numbers into the conversation. Right. So I didn't think that in order to do that, and in fact what they did was they said, there's nothing secret in the chat. So there's
nothing classified.
Nothing classified, except that these are the planes that are leaving right now to bomb Yemen.
Right. Just two more questions on this, and then I want to move on. One was it was to me, it was striking as a reader and as a reporter, but as a reader really in two ways. One was just the fact of it, underscored such a carelessness to national security, but then there was actually the contents of the chat. And one thing that struck me was that you actually get to witness a little bit, because when anything that's public with Trump, these cabinet meetings are just like you go around and it's like demonstrations of fealty, right? But you got to see a little bit of an actual debate in the chat. The part that sticks with me was at the end, they're kind of going back and forth and there's real difference of opinions. And Stephen Miller, who officially has no national security role at all, is just like, you heard the man, we're bombing. And everyone's like, okay. But I'm curious what else struck you about kind of those divides we're seeing play out that actually have meaningful policy implications in the Trump administration.
Right. That was the most salient one. They're having a back and forth. There's a team, and you could predict who's on the team of, the J.D. Vance team, which is like, why are we doing this? America first. Who cares? And then there's a Mike Waltz, more, CIA lean forward. We have to deal with the Houthis. And by the way, it wasn't, it's like one of those things where you see them communicate and like, they're actually debating. They're actually having a serious conversation. Two sides going back and forth. One of the interesting aspects of the conversation was how much it was focused on their resentment of Europe. It's like, why are we protecting European shipping? These people should do it for themselves. And then it's like, well, the Europeans can't do it for themselves. We do. This is what we do. And just a deep, deep, deep resentment of European trading partners. I mean, in other words, it's not just a performance for the public, let's squeeze more money out of Europe to pay for NATO. They just hate our European allies.
It was also, another thing I'll say, for Hegseth, it was someone who, my 6-year-old is really into the Spy Museum in DC. We have a membership, and anytime we go, we have to stop by the gift shop, and I get her like a spy watch or walkie-talkies, and she comes home and she wants to show them off to everyone. And that's what Hegseth felt like, right? Like he had these cool new war toys that could bomb places far away, and like that was the energy he was bringing to the chat.
No, so I'm talking to my phone as this thing is unfurling in my car in the Safeway parking lot, and at some point, like Hegseth writes, "OPSEC is clean," which is something that you expect in like a Tom Clancy, OPSEC is clean.
It very much wasn't.
What I said to my phone. Immediately heard by Iranian intelligence, right? Because they turned it into a microphone, I'm sure. That phone is so radioactive. That's in the safe still. That the phone that I have now is not the phone, obviously. What I thought was like, I'll just say it. It's like, dude, you are the Secretary of Defense. You don't have to play Secretary of Defense. Like we know. Like, it's good. We're all good. Like, you're the Secretary of Defense. You're in charge of the greatest military in the history of the planet. Like, but J.D. Vance is on the chat, right? And all these peers. And, we know from all the reporting about Pete Hegseth that, obviously he didn't have qualifications for this job. There were questions about his management capabilities even then, questions about his temperament, obviously drinking and marriages and all the rest. And so I feel like this was a moment where he was sort of like showing the rest of the gang, including Marco Rubio, who comes heavy by comparison. Like Mark, that's a serious guy, and he's like saying, "Look, I got all the stuff. 0500, 0600. I can talk in military time. We know you were in the Army. It's fine."
Right.
It's like we got it. That was a weird aspect of this, and that's where he got into trouble. It's like you don't like first rule of Fight Club is like don't talk about when you're bombing Yemen. And so that was it. The Europe, the sort of the quasi-isolationist trade warriors, and then of course the inappropriate use of emojis was obviously humorous. But then the Stephen Miller coming in, who had not been chatting. Stephen Miller comes in and says, "The president wants to do this. We're doing it." And then everybody was like, "Can't wait to do it." So you talk about, team of rivals, or you talk about the way you want a cabinet to work, actual arguments. There was an argument going on, including with the vice president, until Stephen Miller told him to stop arguing and I think it really underscored the importance, the centrality of Stephen Miller in the decision-making process, all down the list of subjects, domestic and foreign.
Yeah, 100%. And last question on this. This happened pretty early in the Trump administration, but it was a moment where we were already seeing media companies, and we can talk more about this later, media companies caving to him, tech companies caving to him. Like, did you have any hesitation? And you talked a little bit about what you feared the consequences were, but what were the actual consequences, other than I think like we got some new subscribers?
We got there's a funny aspect of that. We'll talk when we went to see Trump afterwards. We'll talk about that. That was one of the many amusing aspects of that particular meeting in the Oval Office.
My next question.
I could feel your segue. I'm predicting the segue. There are media organizations, owners of media organizations, who would not have allowed this to be published, I'm sure. I happen to have the nature of this kind of story. Let me talk semi-theoretically. The nature of this kind of thing is anybody who touches it is infected by it. So we had as a goal to limit the knowledge of what was going on as we're preparing this story. But obviously, I also felt compelled, or through our attorneys, felt compelled to let the ownership level know that there's something going on, and it's really weird, and it could have serious consequences for our publication. And all you can ask for in that case is ownership that says, "You're the journalists. Go do your journalism. If it's true, print it." And that's what we have at The Atlantic. That's what I think exists at the New York Times. I'm pretty sure it exists at the New York Times. It doesn't exist at many television networks. It doesn't obviously exist at the Washington Post on a certain level. It's hard. It's hard to when you're dealing with a president and administration that does not respect the norms and restraints traditionally built into the relationship between the press and the White House. You have to take into account things that you never had to take into account before. You never thought that George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden would throw us in jail. The thought never crossed my mind. But this is a different scenario, so the stakes are much higher. And this is the acid test of ownership. Like you have to trust us. This is what we're doing. This is what we do. This is the bargain. And I have an owner at The Atlantic who has a lot of guts and knows what to do.
So I will say it felt like Trump, and I'll explain why. It felt like Trump came away from that experience with us, with you in The Atlantic, with sort of begrudging respect. And that was borne out in a sort of long journey we went on together to write a cover story, the June cover story, on Trump that involved an interview with the president. So just a little background is I moved over to The Atlantic along with like a sleeper cell of Washington Post colleagues. And very early on, Jeff had assigned myself and Michael Shearer, another former Postie now at The Atlantic. They never promised covers, so cover-length story on Trump, trying to tell the story of sort of, people forget, but there was like a brief period, and it was stunningly brief, but where it really looked like his entire political career was over. To tell the story of sort of his remarkable comeback, how he clawed his way back, what were the lessons he learned in his 4 years out of power, and how he returned to the White House, understanding the levers of power better, and for the various reasons why his second term already feels very different from his first. And as part of that, we did what you normally do, which is you put in for an interview with the president, and we sent a memo to the White House explaining the story we wanted to do, why we wanted to talk to him. He doesn't like me, but there was one story I once wrote when I was at the New York Times about how in 2015, about how his Make America Great Again hats had become like the hipster fashion accessory in Brooklyn. So we reminded him of that story, right? Like we do all the things, and Trump stunningly agrees to an interview. And then midway during the reporting process, people are participating, and suddenly we find out, I'm out for a jog, and we find out we are not getting the interview because Trump, in a Truth Social post, basically attacks me by name, attacks my co-writer Michael by name, and cancels the interview to the world that none of the world knew was coming. And I immediately get a call from Jeff, which was nice of you. I appreciated that, but I felt so stressed out that I had like lost the interview for The Atlantic. But anyhow, so the way this ends, I'll just do like a very brief clip note. So he attacks us, then the interview's off. We're still doing the story. Just because someone attacks you and just because they aren't going to talk to you doesn't mean you don't do the story. My colleague Michael calls Trump one weekend. Trump picks up the phone, chats with Michael for 20 minutes. So we get an interview with the president.
Remember, that's not normal either. Yeah. This is the president who gives out his cell phone.
Right. He did not.
And God bless him for
it,
by the way.
To be fair, he did not give it out to us, but we got it. Michael calls him. He chats with Michael for 20 minutes, so we have an interview. So we're like, okay, we even have a 20-minute interview with the president. We call him back another time to try to get him again. He doesn't pick up, but that night at like 1:30 a.m., Michael gets what we find out later is basically a butt dial from the president when he is leaving a UFC fight.
He was leaving the wrestling, right?
UFC 305 in Miami. And then...
when you listen to this...
I'm getting to a question.
It reminds me of the Obama administration.
And so anyhow, then, and this is building up to a question, but at the end, the piece is closed. We have shipped the piece. And Michael and I get a call from the White House that says, like, the president actually wants you to come in for an interview.
This is after Signalgate.
This is after Signalgate. Yeah. Right. So it's surprising for a number of reasons. And he says, and then Stephen Chung, the comms director, says, oh, and by the way, like the president says, Jeff can come if he wants. So we call Jeff. So we're all getting ready to go in for an Oval Office interview. Well, first we see if we can claw back, if we can stop the presses. We can. We pull it back. We're getting ready. The morning of the interview, he sends out another tweet publicly, now attacking all three of us by name, and explaining. He says he was doing the interview out of, quote, out of curiosity and as a competition with myself. And he said that unlike Jeff's suckers and losers story, Jeff was, quote, somewhat more successful with Signalgate. And so I want you to talk about one of the things Jeff asked Trump when we went into the Oval was, what did you mean I was more successful? Did you mean I had, exposed real vulnerabilities in the national security apparatus that you've now patched up? What was Trump's response?
Right. He only has one measurement of success is attention, right? And so what he meant was you got a lot. Anybody who can seize the news cycle from him gets his respect because it's all performance and it's all I mean, he's the master of attention getting. And so what he meant was, I really had to contend with that. I mean, he had to contend with the suckers and losers thing too, but he just did that by like saying crazy stuff for, well, actually years. But in this case, it was sort of like, I felt it like he was sort of like looking at the Atlantic and saying, all right, you guys won this round. So like, we got to talk about it. And I've got to like switch my position. So now I'm going to like kind of butter you up a little bit, which was the kind of the tone in much of our conversation.
Yeah, I mean, talk about that too, because we were talking about going into the interview. We didn't know if he was bringing us in to kind of yell at us and let us ask
like Zelensky style,
and throw us out. But that wasn't. And I suspected it was going to be what it ended up being. But what was the vibe?
The vibe was. So we walk into the Oval, and he's sitting behind the desk as he always is. And the Truth Social post came out at noon. We were in there at 3. Yeah. So I said, "Hey, thanks a lot for that Truth Social post," or something like that. And he's like, "I was just trying to put a little extra pressure on you." And then he said something that's very true and shows how this is all performance in a kind of way. He said, "Anyway, you'll sell a lot more magazines." True.
Yeah.
True. I mean, and like,
and he understands that.
He understands that, and it doesn't bother him. That's what I mean, that it's all professional wrestling at a certain level. It's all like, you're the villain, I'm the villain. We're going to, everybody's making money though, right? So it's all good. I mean, it's kind of a very cynical way of looking at presidential leadership, but that's the, he didn't seem to care. Like he thought it was funny that we were going to sell so many more subscriptions. It's evidence of his power in the culture that he can sell subscriptions to the Atlantic by attacking the Atlantic.
Right.
It's complicated.
That was when we were in the Oval. He also mentioned he was very proud of the fact that him getting involved a bit in the Canadian elections had swung the election away from the Conservative candidate who he would have wanted to win, but he was more impressed that in his
he thought it was funny that the guy he was ostensibly supporting lost just because he got involved.
Yeah.
It was kind of like proof of his existence.
Yeah, it was sort of like a power play.
It was a reverse power play.
Reverse power play.
It was that was a strange one. It's hard to understand, except if you understand him as someone who needs to have an impact and needs to be the central player. One of the really interesting things about that meeting was one of the first things he said. Apart from, he was asking us. Literally, this is true. He was asking us if he should put a chandelier in the Oval Office.
And Jeff said yes.
Jeff
said do it.
I said, do it, man. Do it. I was like, I don't know. I think I took a didn't I? I thought it was neutral on the question of the
Yeah,
chandelier.
we were all, of course,
The
neutral.
quote, by the way, is genius. The quote from him was genius. It was. I'm thinking a lot about this chandelier, and we got all this stuff from Mar-a-Lago. I mean, most of the time I think about China and Russia, but what about the chandelier? It was like the comic timing was impeccable. It was an incredible performance. But the interesting thing about him is that he was talking about the Oval Office and how much attention he's paying to the Oval Office, and he said, really important people come into this office. He says, Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, was just here, and it's like, I didn't say it, but it's like, well, you're the President of the United States. I mean, it is like he's impressed that he remains, and I say this being the same persona in some ways. He remains a very outer borough kind of guy. I mean, he's like, look, I'm from Queens, and they're all coming and paying attention to me. And it's like you might want to get used to that. But there's never. It's like never. It's interesting because it's never enough. It's like if he felt more secure in the role or in his own personality or whatever it is, he might not have that need, and then might not lash out so ferociously when the need is not fulfilled.
I mean, another thing, in a way, I learned to understand Trump pretty early on covering him is that he's a consummate deal maker and showman, but he's someone who is always trying to win the minute, the hour, the day, the person directly in front of him, right? So could
you tell the story of when you're on Air Force One that time at the end of?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, it's an amazing. This is actually, I mean, we've both been, living inside Trump's mind for 10 years. I think Trump is in our lives in a way that's not healthy psychologically. But so I know a lot of stories, but this one just cracks me up every time. You know what I'm talking about, yeah.
So I think, and again, and this is something I'm going to ask you to talk about because it was so on display in the Oval Office directed towards you, but Trump wants to win the person directly in front of him. So when you fly, I've flown on Air Force One with Obama, I've flown with Biden, I've flown with Trump. And, Obama would, he would come back for like 20 minutes at the end of foreign trips when he absolutely had to, and he would do it when the plane was landing. So there was like an out, right? And Biden, never came back. But not only would Trump regularly come back, but and I know that I'm getting to the story, but he's a consummate host. He comes back, right? And he treats it like his own plane. Like, are they taking care of you? Do you need some shrimp? Should I, do you want a Diet Coke? And you sort of feel like if you said yes, the president would bring you a Diet Coke. And so one of these trips, he comes back. It's near the end of his presidency. And this is in a moment when he's started, I can't remember if he had started pardoning people or he was talking about who is going to get ready to pardon. And so we're all gathered around him, talking to him. And then he turns to us and sort of very earnestly and genuinely asks to the group of the press pool with him, you guys have anyone you need pardoned? And it was like, it was such an authentic question that I was like frantically scanning.
My dad.
Yeah. I was like frantically scanning my internal Rolodex to see if there was like, a second cousin I could hook up. But like that's sort of who he is. And so I wanted to ask you, he can be, and I know the island is complicated, but it feels liberal crowd. But I think people who are even skeptical of Trump and don't like him as a person, don't like his behavior, don't like his policies, would be surprised that when he wants to, if you're in a room with him, he can be incredibly charismatic and charming. And I was hoping you could talk a bit about that, because when the three of us went into that Oval Office interview, it was very clear, like Michael and I had a bunch of questions we wanted for our story, and Trump very much wanted to win over Jeff Goldberg of Signalgate. And the entire experience was very clearly oriented towards that.
So I'm actually joining the Trump administration next month. Good luck at the Atlantic. I think every reporter, and there are some reporters in this tent who have the same experience, I know. What people don't understand, first of all, underestimating him is obviously a fatal mistake on the part of anybody who encounters him, including the American voting public, NATO, and the rest of the world, right? Don't call him an idiot. I mean, he's a political genius in a kind of way. and and moreover, he's there is a charm and a humor that comes through. I mean, it's always like if you've ever met a professional wrestler when the cameras are off and he's just not whatever ridiculous name, but just Joe Schmo. They're like, "Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. Oh, you have kids? That's great." And they're entertainers. They want to make you like them. Trump is the same way. Like the whole attacking us on Twitter, and he'll do it again. But when you're with him, it's just part of the. He thinks you're just in for the joke, just like he doesn't understand or doesn't care that kind of language could get somebody hurt one day. But when he puts on the charm, it's pretty charming. And unlike some other previous presidents, he's very, very needy, and he wants you to like him, and he knows how to make people like him. And so it's disarming. He's not Godzilla when you walk in. He can be Godzilla. And here's the thing: the reason I knew that it was going to be, not a screaming, whatever chaotic mess in the Oval Office. Remember, there's a lot of aides in the Oval Office too. He doesn't do these things alone. So I it could have gone any number of directions. But the reason that I knew it was going to be fine is there are no cameras. Like if there had been cameras.
Yeah, that's a good point.
He would have Zelensky'd us, I mean, it would have been the Atlantic, whatever. But in this case, it is just, and you were watching it, and I was amused by it, and there are people who, it's hard to cover him and write about him because you have to separate out the personality and some of the charming characteristics from the fact that obviously he's plainly a populist authoritarian who's destroying American norms and values, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when you go in, at the very least, and you start exposing yourself to him, and I hadn't seen him for like 7 years before that because we were not good. You're reminded that. This guy is really appealing. I mean, think back to the campaign. I think, he's in the McDonald's window handing out French fries to people, and everybody thinks it's American people, voters like, oh, look at Donald Trump, he's in the McDonald's. Kamala Harris, who actually worked in a McDonald's, could not have done that on the campaign. People would have said it looks fake.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I can't describe the alchemy here. I cannot describe what it is about him that makes him this way, but it's a lifetime of practice, and it's a neediness that weirdly comes off as almost a vulnerability, and obviously it works to charm some people.
Yeah. Last question about interviewing Trump. I mean, I find him to be a tricky interview because he filibusters. He saes so many things that are not true that you sort of you're aware there's going to be a transcript put out, and you can't just let him say you can't just let him say things that are not true, but you can't stop him at every untrue thing because you would never get into the interview. And so and you pressed him on a couple of things. But I was just curious, you've interviewed other presidents, other people. Did you have any takeaways of what makes him different in an interview?
I mean, he lives in a reality entirely of his own making. So you can't interview him the way you interview somebody who's tethered to a common set of facts. I mean, it's not an interview. That's the mistake. Yeah, when I remember when Jake Tapper and Dana got the assignment to do the debate. I was talking to Jake, and I was like, how do you handle the fact checking? It seems like a trap. I mean, obviously that debate became famous for something else entirely, but the fact checking, it's fruitless. And I think you could just kind of acknowledge that it's fruitless. I don't know if he doesn't have a learning curve or he just doesn't care. I mean, there's this. It's very, very hard to explain. So when I think about him, I think about how do you describe a personality and a set of behavioral a behavioral pattern and a set of characteristics that most of us have never encountered in the wild. Like, he's not a thing that exists in most people's lives. You've said this, you've put this in a certain way, and I'll probably butcher the quote, but it's like, he doesn't acknowledge the existence of reality. Reality is what he says it is when he's in front of you. And you're not going to move him from this. I mean, he got mad at Ashley. This is amazing. He got mad at Ashley in the previous go around for Ashley writing the horrifying statement that Trump did not win the 2020 election. That's why he was mad at you. He was mad at you for saying that. And I brought this up in this last encounter with him, and I said, I don't understand, because this gets to the core of your question. What do you want to know? What do I want to know when I'm with him? It's like, I want to know why he is the way he is. So I said to him something along the lines of, here's the thing, you're the most successful politician of the 21st century. I mean, you can't, you were down, all the way down, and you came back up, and you've been successful and famous for, decades before this, and I said, and you've won the presidency twice. And he goes, 3 times. And I said, that's exactly what I'm talking about. You don't have to say that anymore. Like, you're the president. We got it. You're it. And he says, look, I wouldn't bring it up, except that it's true that I won the presidency 3, and it's not fair. He's essentially saying it's not fair to the truth to deny that I won the presidency 3 times. And it really bothers him when people come in there and tell him that he hadn't won. I mean, we're seeing this right now, this denial of unpleasant reality. We're seeing it this afternoon. He doesn't like the labor statistics, so he fires the director of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I mean, that is a formula eventually for authoritarian failure, obviously, if you can't. Because Donald Trump can make up a reality, and he's very good at bending reality around him, but eventually the jobs numbers are the jobs numbers, and they will make a reality that's too big even for him to reshape.
And that's sort of my next question. I mean, how do you view, now that we're 6-7 months in, how does he feel? What are the major ways this presidency of his feels different than the first term?
Well, he's much better at it. I mean, I shouldn't say that there's. When I say there's not a learning curve, I mean for what we would all think of, or a lot of us would think of as, a set of facts, labor statistics, for being one such set of facts. Like you're given the unemployment numbers, you're given the new jobs creation numbers, and you deal with it as it is. You don't say those are fake numbers because I don't like them. So I don't mean learning curve in terms of or like sort of emotional self-restraint, or there was this line in 2016, 2017, maybe he'll grow into the presidency. No, he just changed the presidency. He didn't grow into it. He didn't become, I mean, he was following the most, whatever you think about his politics, he was following the most dignified presidential figure, Barack Obama, in modern history, right? And he was not going to be that way. He's not capable of being that way. But when I say learning curve, is that he learned that if you hire the people the establishment wants you to hire, Jim Mattis, John Kelly, et cetera, Rex Tillerson, they're going to get in your way, so don't do it. I mean, he really has learned to not just value loyalty above everything, but actually enforce loyalty above everything, and that's made him much more effective. I think being older and knowing, part of his brain, knowing that he's not actually not allowed to run for a 3rd term. We'll see we'll see how far down the road he goes there. He's doing all the things that he wants to do. He does have core beliefs around immigration and tariffs. Probably the list is short, but those are the things. And these are thoughts that thoughts that are not grounded in data, but they're thoughts that he developed in the 80s. When he formed his ideological viewpoints, and they haven't changed, and he's going to carry them out. And I think he's also learned, I mean, this is something that he told our colleague Mark Leibovich once. He learned that there are tough people in the world, and they become real estate developers, and they're weak cowards and they become politicians. And it's easy to get politicians to do what you need them to do. And he has become a master at there's no Republican Party. There's a Trump party. There's no Republican Party anymore. It's just Trump. And it's Trump all the way down. And one by one, the last Mitt Romneys of the world leave, Don Bacon being the most recent example. They leave. So he has a better understanding of how to manipulate politicians, and he has a very good understanding, and I have to say this, he has a very good understanding of the Democratic Party's actual weaknesses. One of the interesting things he said in the conversation, it wasn't the issue so much, the issue is trans athletes. It wasn't the issue that interested me as much as he was talking almost as a political analyst, not as a partisan. He was saying, I don't understand the Democrats. 85% of the public says they're against having biological males in girls' high school sports. So why do the Democrats keep pushing this? It doesn't make any sense. And he was asking the way a Democratic strategist behind closed doors would ask it. And so he has a good understanding of how to exploit the perception that the Democratic Party is soft and out of touch with, he knows that attacking Harvard is a no-brainer. Right. Like, there's no constituency for Harvard other than people who are already Democrats. So he just has a lot more knowledge of other people's weaknesses now, and he knows how to activate that knowledge into real victories.
He's the only other one I would add is it feels like he's also just much more willing to try to ram through norms and institutions he disagrees with, in part because of what you said. There's no one left there to tell him, you can't do this, I'll resign if you do this, this is the way it works. But so, because he is so...
Well, no, that's, one of the most surprising things of this whole period, this last 6 months, was the Kennedy Center thing. Not important like shifting our nuclear posture or do we support Ukraine or Russia, but important because he understood the culture, control the commanding heights of culture is very important because from the old Breitbart line, culture, politics is downstream from culture, but also I was just struck by it because I thought to myself, wait, you can do that? Like, who would do that? Like what president would say, you know what? I'm going to make myself the chairman of the Kennedy Center, and then just do it. And it's just a norm that you don't do it. He obviously could do it, and he did do it, and that's sort of amazing. One of the lessons of the last 10 years is that laws are pretty rickety things without the cartilage and muscle of long-established norms and a common desire to restrain ourselves in the interest of compromise and democracy.
I mean, you mentioned the Kennedy Center thing, and one thing someone told me when we were reporting, not the Kennedy Center story, but the other Trump story, was that in his first term, he would have said, I want to make myself chairman of the board, and everyone would have told him why he can't do that, why it's too complicated, why it's against the Kennedy Center board rules, and the people serve terms for 6 years, why he'll get blowback. And this time they have a rule that if Trump asks for something twice, they do it. They don't necessarily do it the first time, because as someone put it to me, he does say a lot of crazy shit, but if he asks for it twice, then they're going to do it. And that's one of the big differences. But so I was going to ask, because he is so different in so many ways in the second term, and I think when he first announced his campaign in 2015, a lot of people didn't take him seriously, including media organizations. I mean, have you thought about how we need to, and I mean we writ large, the media, need to cover him differently, or maybe not?
I mean, the first term debate was, do you call him a racist because he's a racist, or do you say that he traffics in racially charged rhetoric or something like that? And, we came to the decision, if he's a misogynist, you call him a misogynist. If he's racist, call him a racist. But, there's a problem in the quote-unquote mainstream media. I think The Atlantic we're trying to reach, I like to reach 100% of Americans. We're trying to reach 70% right now. There's 28% hardcore MAGA that doesn't want to hear anything that we have to say, and there's 2%, Brooklyn socialist hipster Maoist that doesn't want to hear from the left what we want to say. But there's 70%, 75% maybe out there, at the broad center left to center right, and so we're still trying to reach them, and I think the best available answer I have, it's not the best answer, but the best available answer I have now is that since there's a war on both reality and knowledge. I mean, if you look at the through line in a lot of the things that they're going after, from NIH to CDC to NOAA to it's Library of Congress, it's
Smithsonian.
who controls. They don't like it that the government employs people who seek knowledge without regard for how that knowledge would affect the MAGA movement, right? And so the best thing we can do is catalog the attack on knowledge, decry the attack on knowledge when appropriate, and make sure that people at least know. I mean, it's very hard to activate a passive citizenry, right? But it's unusually passive citizenry right now, it seems. You explain to people that firing the people who track Ebola in Africa is probably not a good idea, because it's better to find Ebola at the source and extinguish it than wait till it gets here. If you explain that to American citizens, 99% would say, yeah, that makes sense. Nevertheless, they sweep all that away. And so I think the thing that the baseline thing we have to do is catalog the destruction of the knowledge acquisition and development functions of the government, and then the only other piece of it is I think it's just important to build the record of the sort of unbelievably ostentatious self-dealing and corruption that goes on now. I think there's probably a lot of people who are frustrated here, and I say this in a nonpartisan way. I don't care if this was a Democrat doing this, but it happens to be a Republican this time. But it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable the level of behavior that one associates with tin pot dictatorships when it comes to commerce, when it comes to like personal enrichment. We all remember when Billy Carter. Well, not we all remember, obviously. Although many people in this room actually probably remember. Billy Carter trading on Jimmy Carter's, for nothings. Little every president has an idiot brother who tries to it's not
Roger.
Yeah, it's not that unusual. But here it's just my son-in-law is going to go shake down the Saudis for billions, and everybody's going to be like, yeah, that's cool. Sure, and he's going to build apartment houses in Istanbul. The joke in the NatSec, in the national security community, is that you never really are 100% sure if he's going to attack Iran or build a hotel in Iran, right? And for him, it's like if the Ayatollah had half a brain, he would say, you know what, you're no longer the great Satan, you're the great casino operator, and just come in and and he'd be like, oh, that's fine. Really. So the documenting that is, but we've been asked in our field for 10 years, what do you do? How do you do this? And it's like, well, first of all, steadfastness, don't stop. I can't stand hearing reporters say, we don't have any, thank God, but reporters say, I'm so tired of this. It's the greatest story of your lifetime. America is fundamentally changing and being dismantled under your nose. As a citizen, you could be bothered by it, but as a journalist, you should be energized by it. It has to be documented.
Well, that feels like a great place to stop and move to questions. There's a microphone there and a microphone there if people want to come up and ask Jeff some questions.
Or Ashley.
I have a question for you both. This was fabulous. Does MAGA die when Trump dies?
First of all, do you have any proof that Trump is going to die? He is the luckiest man on the planet. I've always said that. It's like when people always ask, well, this one is going to take Trump down, this scandal. I was like, have you looked at this man's life? He's the luckiest person on the. Imagine getting impeached twice. How would you feel? Pretty bad. But he's just like, whatever. I just got impeached twice. I got indicted 4 times. I've been sued by 30 women for sexual assault. Let's get a hamburger. I mean, it's unbelievable. And he's incredibly lucky. I'm joking, obviously. Does MAGA die? MAGA is like the Tea Party died, except that it didn't. It kind of got transmogrified into MAGA. There'll be a next movement. I mean, the question is there anybody on that side of the fence as talented with like the raw animal genius for knowing other people's weaknesses and knowing the political moment, and knowing what to do when you get your ear shot? I mean, and knowing all the things. There's nobody. I don't think there's anyone like him. I mean, J.D. Vance does not have, this is analytical. I'm not saying this personally, but, Donald Trump, and I know that people in this crowd will object to the way I'm framing it. Donald Trump is obviously very likable to huge numbers of Americans. I'm not sure J.D. Vance is that likable to huge numbers of Americans. I don't know who it's going to be the next time. There's a lot. I mean, obviously Rubio and J.D. Vance are trying to jockey for this. I don't know what Don Jr. I mean, there's a whole range of people who could try this out. But I don't think this is I mean, you know it better than I do. You know MAGA better than I do.
I mean, I'll say very briefly a couple of things. One is that it's interesting that the Trump coalition, which is a lot more diverse, a lot more young, a lot more working class, a lot more voters, frankly, associated with Democrats for modern political history. There's people in the Trump White House who are desperate to turn that into a Republican coalition, right? And not just like a Trump at the top of the ticket coalition. And that is an effort that is happening, but it is unclear to me because of what we see in off-year elections when he is not actually on the ballot, if that can hold. So they want to do that. I don't know if it can. The thing that is striking to me, and in some ways of what MAGA rises out of, and I think what Democratic populism rises out of, is I did a road trip in 2014. I was at the New York Times, and it was just like talk to 1 million voters. I rode the old Route 60, and I started in DC, flew back from Indiana, and everyone I talked to was furious, right? Like they felt like they had done, and they weren't wrong. They felt like they had done everything right. They had moved into a neighborhood where the schools were supposed to be good for their kids. They had worked a 9-to-5 job. They'd saved for their pension. They had bought a house that the bank had told them was a responsible loan that they could afford. And then and then they would point to every single house on their block was foreclosed, right? They were also angry. They were getting government assistance, and they, for whatever reason, they very much deserved it, right? Because they had a real injury or they really needed it. But their neighbor who was getting the exact same assistance was milking the system. And it was a sort of like a burbling distrust in institutions that Trump came along and named and harnessed, but like what they wanted, and they said like these bankers, nothing happened to them, right? Like they were like these clowns in DC and New York. They burned down the system. I'm paying the price, and there's no punishment. And Trump was the one who said, it's drain the swamp. It's burn it all down. But that's what people wanted to do. And I think that is still what a lot of the country wants to do. And there's even more distrust in institutions because a lot of institutions are failing us. And so I don't know, that's not quite the answer to your question, but I think any successful movement will rise up out of, in some way, grappling with the fact that most Americans increasingly trust institutions even less than they did, which was pretty low.
Thank you, guys. On the subject of burn it all down, could you just say a few words about the people behind the curtain? People like Russell Vought, Curtis Yarvin, maybe Stephen Miller, maybe Peter Thiel, who are actually enacting this process of burning it down?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I will say, and part of the thing we looked into in this story of Trump, of how he returned to power and what lessons he learned, was that in those 4 years out of power, there were people like Stephen Miller, like Russ Vought, and a few others who used that time to basically say, like, we're going to return to power and we're going to understand how to do this better. And for 4 years, they just figured out, how do we write regulations better, right? What is the loophole we can use, the Foreign, Alien Enemies Act to deport people? And this, I guess the only thing I would say about that, then I'll kick it to Jeff, is what you are seeing now is not accidental or haphazard the way some of the stuff was in the first term. It was like a very concerted, deliberate effort that was 4 years in the making.
Yeah, I mean, very, very quickly. I mean, it's a strongman project. I think. I mean, it's a group of people who want a center power and a very, very strong executive. They are, to varying degrees. You named a pretty diverse group of individuals, including, one who's like, Curtis Yarvin, who's openly racist, and Russell Vogt, who's a technocrat who's trying to, shrink government and make a very, very strong executive from within. But it's basically a strongman project. It's people who don't, who believe that most Americans aren't qualified for democracy, and this country needs to be led with a firm hand, and that hand should, I don't want to say that the hand should be white, but the hand should believe in, let's call it pre-DEI principles of the way the country should be organized, and they don't hide what they think. I mean, Russell Vogt has been on the record saying that, he doesn't want only to fire government officials, he wants to basically humiliate them to the point where no one wants to become a government official. And so I really think it's in some ways it's just a very basic anti-democratic impulse. And obviously Congress abets this by ceding its responsibility as one of the three branches of government to check the power of the executive. So they have a lot of cooperation on that front. But it's essentially an authoritarian project.
Thank you, and thanks for coming and sharing your thoughts with us tonight. I'd love to hear you talk about the Zelensky mugging, and specifically whether or not how choreographed you believe that event was, and was it all planned out in advance, and if so, who are the members of the administration who would go to those lengths of creating an event of that sort?
Were you there? You were there. I mean, the interesting consequence of the Zelensky Oval Office visit was that a tremendous number of foreign ministries around the world don't want their presidents or prime ministers to have to go to the Oval Office, because it looks like, I mean, he did it to the South African president a few weeks after that. I don't have inside information on that. I know that J.D. Vance in particular has hard feelings about Zelensky actually, if you watch the hour meeting, most of it was fine. And remember, this is before Trump is pivoting, or seems to be pivoting, in an interesting way away from Russia. Really is. And has been saying nicer things about Zelensky. Zelensky's also gone to school on how, like every foreign leader, gone to school on how to talk to the man so you get something done. But I don't know if it was a setup, but I think they went in loaded for bear, looking to put him in his place.
Yeah, the reporting I have is that it was not a huge orchestrated thing. I think, as Jeff mentioned earlier, having cameras there totally changes that dynamic. I think it would have potentially been a different meeting behind closed doors. And I had also heard that the president was sort of grumpy and annoyed that day about various things, including the deal that he didn't think was good enough. So Zelensky was walking into someone who was already not predisposed to him, but I don't think it was sort of like a Machiavellian, four-dimensional chess.
You know the line about four-dimensional chess? People sometimes think that Trump is playing 4D chess when actually he's just eating the pieces. And that's a superpower in a kind of way as well. It's like don't it is what it is. Yeah.
As you were talking about your meeting with Trump in the Oval Office, it felt like I was listening to a description of someone who has a narcissistic personality disorder. And I'm curious, since you've interacted with other presidents in the past, have you seen that before to this degree?
Millard Fillmore was a real asshole. I mean, that's just I'm older than Ashley, though, so I don't know. There's never been a president like him in our lifetimes, has there? But Andrew Jackson was fun in the Oval Office. If there was an Oval Office then, I don't think there was. I don't do the psychological diagnosis. I just try to describe it. I mean, anybody who thinks that they can be president is obviously already like half out of his mind. I hope there's no Obamas here right now. I mean, he was like sort of the most sane version of it, but you have to think about it. When you really think about wanting to be president, you have to be psychologically unique. You have some psychologically unique characteristics. I just think he's. I'm not gonna attach words that I don't understand. I haven't studied to what he is. I think the descriptions speak for themselves.
Hi, thank you for the really interesting conversation. So I'm a teacher in a university, and one thing we talk about in universities is how trust in universities has fallen since 2015, particularly signaling at that date out, 2015. And a lot of the coverage in the mainstream media, in the Atlantic, in the New York Times, was about how mainstream universities were woke, how Marxist, leftist, wokesters had taken over the universities. And the university I teach at was run by anti-woke white dudes like every other institution. And it was just like this weird misrepresentation of what was going on. And the Trump administration ran on that and enabled them to link universities and knowledge production with this kind of sinister leftist Marxist stuff. And I'm wondering how you detach, I mean, Ashley Parker talked about the the elite, the institutions betraying us with regard to, economic issues, and they clearly did. But I think there was the anti-wokeism and Trumpism are so intermingled. How do you, in the Atlantic, New York Times, how do you distinguish yourselves from that kind of bizarre charges and misrepresentation of these institutions? And I'll just end with Jewish students crying in my office during the protests last year they're saying I'm an anti-Semite and I'm, Jewish and in the protests. So I'm wondering how you deal with these, especially the issues around wokeism that are now we see are so central to the methodology of Trump.
I mean, you and I have been arguing from a distance for 10 years about this same point, and we're not going to come to an agreement tonight. Obviously, when you have faculties that are 95%, especially on the humanities side, Democratic and have no Republican representation, but I'm not going to have the argument right now. I think it's possible to cover more than one subject and be nuanced about different things. I think that there are plenty of examples in the academy of people being obviously way far to the left of the American center. I also think, and obviously in STEM it's different, I obviously think that Trump weaponized legitimate critiques of elitism and wokeism, or whatever you want to call it, to make a hardcore case against the universities. I would say that the universities themselves are split. There are presidents who are arguing, it might be for self-interest, that there is some truth to a critique about our universities being overly elitist and overly. I hate using the word woke because it doesn't have a meaning anymore. I mean, anything Trump doesn't like now is woke. One of his geniuses, obviously, one of the aspects of his genius, he'll take any word. Remember, fake news was not his term; it was somebody else's term, and he co-opted it. But I think there's nuance. You talk about Jewish students crying in your office because they were in the protests. I heard a lot of Jewish students crying who were opposed to the protests. I mean, there's more than one truth out there about what happened on certain university campuses. I would also say that I think in the years leading up to Trump, there was plenty of evidence. I come back to what Trump was asking, not in a really harsh way, but asking in an analytic way about biological boys and girls sports. There was a lot of ammunition provided by left-wing academics to the right, and the right exploited it. the Christopher Rufos of the world went probably way too far with it and made too broad a point. But much of the American people were susceptible to it.
And we are at time, so how about we just do one more question and we'll keep our answer tweet sized.
Oh, sorry.
No.
You mean expanded Twitter or the old Twitter?
Dealer's choice. But I guess last question.
My question is, how do you view the possibility of Trump attempting a third term, and what do you think of the safeguards against it 3 years down the line?
I don't know how he would do it, but my imagination has failed before. Okay.
Yeah, let's end it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.